And can you just pop up the agenda, Ned?
Yeah.
So, hi everybody. Here's the agenda for our session today, and we're going to be talking about fuel debt and helping you to identify and support tenants who might be experiencing fuel debt issues. So I'm going to start by giving a quick introduction, and then I've got a series of questions that I'm going to ask Simon and Peter, which will focus on their experience of supporting residents through our programme. It'd be really great, as I said, throughout our conversation, if you just pop them in the chat, whatever that might be. And afterwards, we've got time towards the end of the session where we'll come up and answer them. We've also got a couple of polls during the session, which we would love you to engage in. If you've not done these in Zoom before, they should just pop up on your screen at the point that I asked Ned to stick them up. And we'll give you a couple of minutes just to answer them. We're going to be aiming to finish the session before 1 o'clock, so we'll keep on time, and Ned's going to keep an eye on the timing so that we can wrap up on time. So I'll start just by introducing you to the panel. Hi, I'm Emily. I've worked at Groundwork for over 15 years now, and I've managed the Green Doctor service in Yorkshire since 2013. The team has grown in that time from working just within the Leeds area to now working right across Yorkshire and the North East. My role in the last 3 years has seen me working across all of the Groundwork Trusts in the North to develop the service into new areas of highest need and supporting the growth of the service to other areas of England and Wales too. We've also grown the service to deliver more specialist advice, such as retrofit assessments, which we covered in the last session, and it's still available on YouTube for those of you that missed it. And also money advice, which we're going to cover in this session. Joining us today, we've got Simon, who manages our Green Doctor service in Yorkshire, which is the biggest Green Doctor team outside of London. In the last financial year, across the North, we distributed £170,000 in emergency top-ups to people who were in crisis and saved 5,894 households over £210,000 on their fuel bills through advice and accessing small grants. We've also got Peter, who works in Simon's team. Peter brings to the team his experience of supporting people with benefits and money advice from his past work for 12 years working with housing associations, supporting tenants, and 10 years in a variety of advice roles encompassing housing and debt advice. He's currently managing Groundwork's Green Doctor Money Advice service, through which we're providing welfare support payments in partnership with Leeds City Council and other grant funds. So, can you get rid of the agenda? Fabulous. So before we start with the questions for the panel, we've got a poll we'd love you to participate in because we're really interested in finding a bit more about yourselves. So Ned, are you all right putting that up on the screen?
Yeah. It's not letting me launch it for some reason I can't understand. Sorry, we'll have to do that a bit later. I'll have to.
Okay, no, that's all right. We can come back to it. I wonder if it's because we're recording. Okay, we will see if we can get that sorted later. So we'll start with the problem itself. Simon, do you want to give us an overview of how people are finding it since the April price rises?
Yeah, thanks, Emily. And yeah, hello, everyone, and thanks for joining. Well, we're in the midst of the worst cost of living crisis in 40 years, according to the ONS, and more so than many other major European countries. We're seeing a greater demand coming through for our service, probably a 70% increase in the number of referrals coming through. And we're also seeing a wider demographic of people coming through. So whilst we're a fuel poverty service and we support around 3,000 people just from Groundwork Yorkshire across the Yorkshire region each year, we're seeing a much wider demographic of people. So it's people who may be in work, not kind of usual people who we'd see coming into the service. Which is one huge change. Just as an indicator, we work in partnership with the here in Leeds, the local welfare support scheme. Since April, we've we give out emergency fuel payments across the whole city. So since April, we've given payments out to about 610 households with a value of about £52,000. To put that in perspective, that's in 2021, and the whole of 2021, we gave out 570 emergency fuel payments with a total of 32,000. So since April, we've given out more emergency support than we have done in the whole of 2021, just to give you a bit of an idea there. In terms of energy price rises, so as many as you will know here, you know, the 1st of October 2021, we saw a 12% increase. Then in 1st of April, we saw another 54% increase onto our energy bills. And now in October, could be between 42%, even estimates as high as 65% increase to our energy bills. That'd be taking the average cost of your energy bill to between £3,000 and £3,200 a year. So the impact on people is many just can't make ends meet. We've got prices rising from food, from transport, energy, privately rented people are struggling with rent increases. Again, to put in perspective, 2019, we're looking at about 3.2 million people in fuel poverty across England and Wales. In October, that's predicted to rise to 12 million people across the country in fuel poverty, which is quite staggering, really. You equate that with excess winter deaths. You know, we've seen around an average of about 40,000 just excess winter deaths each year. That's between November and March period. And we're going to see a knock-on effect in those figures as well. As the number of people in fuel poverty increases, that will also correlate, I would imagine, with the number of excess winter deaths. In terms of people struggling financially, so we've got a 25% increase in fuel debt. This is a recent report from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. So it's 2 million households more struggling with fuel debt. We're seeing that the number of vouchers that we're issuing has increased massively, and that's now in the summer period, which is quite worrying. And we're really looking towards October and the winter months where we're expecting a huge demand. We're looking at households that have fallen with essential payments. So 7 million more households have fallen behind with essential payments. That's things energy, food, rent, toiletries. That's a 20% increase since April. Personal debt has increased to 3.8 billion in the last 7 months. And all these are having a knock-on effect in a variety of ways, but especially on people's mental health. So we're seeing levels of people really frustrated on the telephone, quite desperate, worried, very anxious. Just a report quite recently from the Royal College of Psychiatrists, looking at 46% are reporting worse mental health since the beginning of the year. We've got 4.3 million people waiting referrals for mental health services like IAP services. That's a record high, and there's a 1.4 million backlog in people trying to access mental health support. They call it a mental health budget, where it's the mental health budget is pretty much empty at the moment for many people because there's a lack of resilience. Yorkshire Building Society recently, in terms of like financial resilience, is looking at what 17% of households have no savings whatsoever. So you've got a price increase, no savings, increase in debt, and 15% have savings of less than £500. So that's just giving a bit of an outline of what we're trying to deal with at the moment and what's to come. In terms of like key challenges in terms of energy, so we've got the energy costs and increases, and that's, you know, a number of factors contributing to that. The war in Ukraine being one of them, rising gas prices. We've got the quality of dwelling, which is a contributing factor to people's energy vulnerability. People living in cold homes, lower EPC ratings, much less resilience, high levels of fuel poverty. You've got stability of the income, so that's we're looking at people on benefits. Government could help quite a bit with the debt deductions that may be coming from people's benefits at source, which is people are finding it very hard to cope with. So you got 94% of people claiming universal credit with deductions going out. 72% of those went hungry in the last month. So it's just showing out some of the government policies which are also having an impact upon people. So yeah, that's just a bit of a background of what we're facing at the moment.
Thanks for that, Simon. There's some really scary statistics in there. So I guess what people are really going to be interested in is if those really high numbers of people who are suffering from mental health issues, lack of money to pay for bills and rising bills and costs for running the household, it'd be really useful to have a chat about some top tips. So Pete, I'm going to throw this one over to you. Have you got some top tips which housing associations that have joined us today could be sharing with their tenants to help them manage their budgets?
Okay, well, yeah, as Emily, you said in my introduction, it was actually 10 years I spent working for a social landlord, not 12. I've added a couple of years, but I'm aware of these that you know, since austerity, the social landlords have been facing the advent of universal credit, dwindling incomes of tenants, and obviously you need to look after your bricks and mortar, and you need to make sure you're getting your rental intake to keep standards high and keep your companies going. I think the sad fact is that although Simon quoted those figures of the average bill, is that I would think most of the customers that we come across on a day-to-day basis, and I would imagine that yourselves coming through on a day-to-day basis, are already spending less than those amounts because they've always never had the budget to heat their homes to the required standard. I think that we're going to see more and more people what we would describe as self-disconnecting, which is where you've got a prepayment meter and you just run out of money to put on it, or rationing, where you're afraid to put your heating on. And I think the best case scenario that this organisation face is that we're going to have to help people manage that and make some rational decisions. For example, it might be, well, you normally turn your heating on in October. Could you put an extra pulley on and turn it on a couple of weeks later, because you'll be, you know, making a bit of a saving there. I hate to have to say it, but I think that those are the decisions that people will be facing. I think the other thing that we can all help in doing is becoming more aware of how energy is charged. Essentially, it's charged per kilowatt hour. So, and how many kilowatt hours we consume is multiplied by whatever the cost of the unit cost is. And that a lot of time, my time and effort is spent sort of saying, well, actually, this is the billing is correct, and it's not how much, you know, you are using this much. Let's explore that a little bit more. Let's explore where we can make savings. So what I'm saying is to each and everybody in the room is that if you don't, perhaps helping understanding that in a bit more detail yourself. We do have a fuel poverty awareness, of course, people can come on. If you understand it, then you're able to offer that little bit of help and advice. We can go into more depth with people and identify savings. Moving on from that, I'm a great fan of smart meters for all the problems that they've had. Essentially, the in-home display, or if you access it through your login, you can see on a half-hourly basis, you can more or less work out when someone has a shower, when somebody cooks the tea. For anyone that's not Northern, that's the third meal in the day. So you can sort of identify that because you see the spikes in usage. What it also shows you on an annual basis is if somebody is using, you'd expect the heating side of things, whether that's gas or electric, to go up in the winter months. It can also be indicative of a problem if you're not seeing that expected graph. So again, encouraging people to become more, get a smart meter and actually understand how you can make it work for you. Again, that's something we would support people in doing. Okay. I'll talk a bit about, I would imagine that most of you guys have starter tenancies, and and I think that's really key. You're getting a lot of people who have a tenancy for the first time, and the thing we come across a lot is people that haven't registered with suppliers, utilities, council tax, and then 6 months down the line, they get caught up on, and already they've got a debt. And then that has a negative impact on you guys getting your rental intake, because suddenly they've got 3 or 4 priority debts, and especially with universal credit, they may be then missing a month's payment to catch up on their electricity bill or whatever. So that financial literacy support, I think, is also key. Probably, if you're not already doing that, encouraging your tenants, your tenant group, whether or not they are already savvy or not, to actually do an income and expenditure. I think it's a really healthy exercise for everyone to look through where the money's going, and then getting that specialist advice if they're in debt. I think also then, with a key to a new tenant, is that we come across it a lot where for the best will in the world, they've got a really good boiler or good heating system, good insulation, but they haven't a clue how to operate their heating system, by and large, because the technicians are in such a hurry, they don't have the time to explain how to use that. And you'll see often people using a thermostat as a heating control, and it's 25 or down at like 12, and that's really indicative of somebody that could use a little. So it's just observing those things. Is it cold when I walk in, or is it the absolute polar? Is it absolutely boiling, and is this person unnecessarily spending heat? And obviously there's knock-on effects with mold growth and condensation that we all know about. I would also say, I think you need to identify your winter vulnerable customers. Anyone who's using a prepayment meter, they are going to be paying double the amount or more this winter to enjoy the same amount of heating. That is going to have a knock-on effect on their ability to pay, rent and feed themselves. It's a plea really to have a realistic expectation on those pressures on those particular tenants. I think that's also true of anyone that's got an all electric. I don't think there'll be anyone amongst us that doesn't know that storage heaters are notoriously expensive, and a lot of people will just react to having storage heaters by just switching them off altogether and shivering out of fear of putting them on. And just finally, I'm just going to raise a couple of case studies that we had one this week. We're just sort of plotting the progress of this with this customer. Direct debit, £70 a month, pensioner, couple living in social housing, bungalow. It's gone up from £70 to £190 a month. And when we've delved down into it, that's actually correct. They may have had a great tariff 18 months ago and fixed into a deal. That's come to an end, and now they're being charged possibly 3 times as much as they were previously. We're able to do a benefit check with that couple. There was an issue. We didn't think they were getting housing benefit. It turns out they are, and we're going to go back and they have smart meters, so we're going to go back and delve into their usage in a bit more detail, because there's a slight indication of excessive usage. I had another one, and thankfully this has changed, where I had a lady who was bereaved. She'd lost a daughter around about 20 that she'd cared for throughout her life, and sadly died. Obviously, this meant that all the child-related benefits, all the disability-related benefits disappeared out of her income, and she had to make a claim for universal credit as a single person. She wasn't responding to letters because she wasn't in any fit state to respond to letters, and agreed of having a threat of a prepayment meter installed, agreed to have direct debit payments taken out of her payments, leaving her with £80 a month living expenses. Thankfully, we got the energy company to withdraw the direct payments, and now there is currently a moratorium, so that because what was happening is that the DWP would not quibble with the whatever the energy company quoted as being usage, and obviously with the usage prices going on, they were getting vast chunks of somebody's benefit, which again is detrimental to the customer or your tenant, but it also puts pressures on rent take as well. So yeah, that's the gloomy picture. We're saying get to understand your heating systems in a bit more detail. Make sure your EPCs are reviewed, because we come across people where they've not had an EPC done for whatever reason. They may not have allowed access, and then they may have been missed for renovations. It might just be topping up of loft insulation or cavity wall insulation. Because there wasn't an EPC done, there wasn't that. So a thorough review of EPCs would be something that could help. And then those little low-cost things that are easy fixes like loft insulation or something as landlords that they help families. I'm sort of open to questions now, I think. Is that about right, Ned, for timing?
We'll do questions at the end, Pete. I would just add to that if anybody missed our January webinar, Simon had a load of really good top tips in there that were for individuals as well. So that's on our YouTube channel. So do go and have a look at that. I'll send out the link to everybody afterwards just to make sure that you've all got that. So we've got probably about another 10 minutes before we launch into questions. So do make sure you keep dropping them into the chat.
Okay.
I've got one final question, which is for both of you, Simon and Pete. So what sort of support can tenant officers and other frontline workers provide to people who are in dire hardship?
Do you want me to just start off with this, Pete?
Yeah.
I think that, one of the first things is being aware of what's on offer in your local area from your local council, for example. So there's, and it does vary from council to council. So I'm talking about things like the government money, which is being channeled for the household support fund. One of the first places I would look at would be the possibility of, via the household support fund, we mentioned fuel vouchers before, or emergency fuel top-up payments. And this fund, depending on the council, can be used quite flexibly. So it could be used towards the costs of perhaps inefficient white goods. One of the difficulties that we have sometimes is people on low incomes can't afford the most efficient appliances. Support could be offered through the household support fund, again, depending on your local council. It could also be like we have here in Leeds and Bradford. We can use this on a flexible basis to do things like DIY jobs around the house, which may be contributing to cold homes in some way. And as housing associations, I think that's, as Pete mentioned, that's something to be really aware of who your vulnerable tenants are. The ones that are known on prepayment meters, the ones that may have been previously referring in because of damp mold condensation issues. Raising awareness within teams that dealing directly with tenants, so that's like customer service teams, your tenancy engagement teams, that's the repairs teams, being more trained and more involved to spot signs of difficulty, people struggling to cope. Something else I would say would be don't delay in seeking support. So deal with outstanding debts, contact your housing association. Many of the housing associations here may have financial inclusion teams available, may be able to do benefits checks, especially at this time when we've got government support money coming through. First payment goes out today, £326, which is going out to many people. Some people who may not claim certain benefits, they could have a benefits check now, they may be eligible for certain benefits, they maybe could put that claim in, that claim could be backdated, and they could receive that government support where they didn't have before just because of a benefits check. So I would look at those types of issues very much, and looking into what's on support with the through the local council. Yeah, what do you think of, Pete, of things like people trying to the balance transfers, people in difficulty, credit, trying to reduce the amount of interest payments, putting all balances for credit onto one card? Do you think that's a good solution?
Well, I think the first thing is that essentially there is debt and there is borrowing is a mortgage, it might be a car loan. You're just trying to spread the payments and you can manage the monthly payments. It becomes debt at the point where you are struggling to meet those payments. And it is early identification that you're in that situation. And by and large, you'll come across it yourselves. It's like, I wish they told me about this 12 months earlier and they hadn't had to suffer all that stress, and that we plotted and planned a way forward. You will, not everybody in social housing is poor, and following all the sort of making sure you're not paying too much interest on those things might work for a variety of people. But again, you can get some FCA guidance on that through an accredited debt advisor. What we've also seen arise in things like, we might have got rid of Wonga, but we've still got things like Clan as a new thing, or these people might afford 3 or 4 payments and then suddenly get into difficulties. So it's get advice. There's lots of online tools such as National Debt Line, for example, where you can get a lot of information, do your budget sheet, and then it will flag up, oh, I think you need help. Get onto your step change, your CAB, your local advice agency, and I would imagine a lot of you guys will have in-house budgeting and financial inclusion teams. I was just going to say on that, and sorry, Simon, on the household cost of living support. You're quite right. The first tranche of that is coming in this month. The second lot should be coming in the autumn. I would imagine that will get ate up on very immediate expenses, and still, I think in January and February people will be struggling. So that and pensioners will get it as part of their addition to their winter fuel payment. So the £100 to £300 they get, depending on your circumstances, will be have an additional amount on it. And again, will come typically drop in the late autumn. And also the Warm Homes discount. Thankfully, people of working age no longer necessarily need to apply for it. It should come automatically if you meet your uncertain benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to also emphasise at the moment, as we're finding, just the importance of working in partnership, even more so now than ever before, and having that wide network of specialised referral partners, and working off that principle of making every contact count. So whoever you've got who's dealing with the customer or the tenant, they're looking at things on more of on a holistic kind of basis. And having those referral partners and those networks and those referral pathways in place for those common issues that are going to arise, I think that's even more important now than probably ever before. And Pete mentioned quite rightly there that the new tenant schemes, avoiding getting into debt issues at an early stage, having essential contacts there for new tenants, perhaps introducing some training programs where you can teach people budgeting skills or how to do an income expenditure assessment for themselves. I think that would be really beneficial for some housing associations if we could adopt that kind of approach. Also looking into things like the partners before, we mentioned it can be an historical barrier sometimes for housing providers to get important messages across to tenants. And we found we work with quite a number of housing associations across different areas that having a trusted intermediary, an independent intermediary, can often be a good way, a good conduit to get that message across, rather than coming up against historical barriers where it can be much more difficult to impart important information. Also looking onto things like, we're talking about how to identify best, the most vulnerable clients. So we've talked about, making awareness amongst the relevant teams within housing associations, but also looking at things like technological solutions as well, which may be able to identify people in fuel poverty in homes. So there's technology available where you could have sensors in homes which would be able to give a reading of temperature, how often the heating is switched on, so you can get an idea of people who may still self-disconnect. Peter was mentioning before about the danger with people on prepayment meters. And for like a low-cost kind of solution to keep track of vulnerability and levels of food poverty in people's homes, technology can provide a vital part in this. Same as assessing things like damp mold condensation issues, and then we can have an early intervention to stop that problem escalating and becoming a much more serious problem, both for the tenant and for the provider in the future. So I think that's really important as well. I think Pete mentioned having a greater tolerance as well in terms of dealing with people, customers, tenants who are struggling just generally. And yeah, perhaps having some, looking into winter, people may be struggling with rent, to have a little bit of greater flexibility there, perhaps with the payments. Yeah, I don't know if you've got anything else to add to that, Pete.
Yeah, I think the counter argument to that is also that if somebody's if you are perhaps easing your sort of collection process during the winter months, the people on prepayment meters will typically be paying less in the summer months and have a chance to be able to keep up to agreements during those months. I think also the knock on to this will go into next year when is there going to be another cost of living, or are we just going to have to learn to live with energy prices 2 to 3 times what they were 18 months ago, just like we did with the universal credit uplift. They gave it and then they took it away. And quite a lot of people were where before they were struggling to manage, they were just about managing, and now they're back to and that was an issue that we had immediately that was withdrawn, that people were suddenly falling into arrears with their energy suppliers and other utilities, water as well. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to draw you both to a close there because I'm conscious of the time, and we've had some fantastic questions coming in. So let's have a look through these. So we've had want to know what rights people have and what help they can get regarding fuel debt, and what can we do to prevent them being cut off. Do debts attract interest, or can they be frozen?
Right. So no, I mean, an energy debt is a form of credit. It's a credit agreement. And the only additional costs tend to be at the late stage, if you've been ignoring your letters and they have to go to enforcement and have the enforcement costs like you would do when you're pursuing a rent arrears action. And disconnection shouldn't happen unless there's been theft involved or fraud. But installing a prepayment meter can be an effective disconnection means to put the money on. They do have to risk assess vulnerability before they install a prepayment meter. They don't always do that. The other good thing about smart meters now that we've got the SMET2 rollout as opposed to SMET1, problems were then pretty much in the smart and it mode to non-prepayment mode at the flick of a switch, or like a computer command. So if they do make a mistake, they do they install a prepayment meter incorrectly, then it's a lot easier to rectify than the old key card meters that you see in many properties still.
Okay, that kind of leads on to one of the other questions we've had, which is about prepayment meters. So there's a question someone's had about, our company's going to look at stopping prepayment meters that have already got debt on them, leading customers into arrears. So I guess, is there going to be anything that stops that debt that's already on a meter and just charges them for existing use?
I try not and so that in a roundabout sort of way. I mean, we've always tried to discourage the use of prepayment meters where we possibly could, because of this, high winter costs and potential self-disconnection. However, currently, the different, because everybody's now paying a standard variable rate, the premium for the extra cost of the standing charge of is minimal. So in terms of them using them more or less, then basically what we need to do is negotiate it down to a minimum weekly amount, which is whatever the arrears amount is each year with the DWP. It's about 370, isn't it? 380. The second point to that is that you've got debt, and then you've got amounts owed, and an amount owed is the daily charges going on the standing charge. So now that we've got universal credit and monthly payments, you might find someone that's topped up at the beginning of last month. They could top up again this month, and suddenly they're 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pounds to pay just to pass go. So you can contact the energy company and ask them to put, say, for example, somebody doesn't top up their meter over the summer months, and they'd accrued a 5, 6, 7, 50, 60, 70, 80 pound debt. What you can do is you might suddenly find then that you've got to get that serviced and get their heating back on, and they can't do it because they're having to feed the meter to clear the owed. You can ring the company and get them to do what they call adding that accrued debt onto the total debt, so at least it's only coming in off at £3, £4, £5 a week. I hope that answers your question. I'm happy to share my email out and go into more details about that if necessary, if you've got somebody in particular in mind.
I think that's a really good answer. Thanks for that, Pete. I think because we had a chat about storage heaters, we've got one question that's come in about the impact of using storage heaters as a main source of heating, and is the situation worse for people on those than anyone else? Is it harder to manage the heating?
Oh, no, very much so. If we're talking about the traditional manual heating, where essentially you've got a shutter on a pile of bricks that heat up on allegedly cheaper overnight electricity, then you've got a flap that opens and shuts to promote or reduce the amount of airflow around the bricks. Each one of them, I probably think typically it's about it was last year about £1.40 a night to charge one of them up. So if you've got 3 or 4, then each one of them, it might be 5 or 6 quid overnight. And electricity is 28 pence a unit currently-ish, and gas is 7 pence a unit. It takes the same amount of kilowatt hours to heat a home with electric as it does with gas, because the insulation, the bricks and mortar are still the same. The thermostatically controlled modern storage heaters have got better insulation, so the bricks don't, take longer to cool down. They promote airflow automatically, but it's still running on 28 pence a unit electric as opposed to 7 pence gas. Obviously, if you're looking into, I've just slightly digress into sort of heat pumps, then the kilowatt hour usage annually goes down because of the heat pump. So if, for example, it takes 8,000 kilowatt hours to heat a home on average over a year, that reduces significantly. So the energy input into a heat source is somewhat different. That's not my side of the business. We have people who are a lot more expert on that, but that's my lay understanding of how that works. So I just dread. All you can do is get people to switch switch the damper down overnight, so they're not charging and simultaneously cooling off the brakes. Get the damper down when they're going out, and encourage them to open it up when they need to promote heat into the room. It's the same with gas central heating radiators. They don't radiate, well, they do a bit, but it's the fins at the back that can use the convection current. So again, if you're seeing your customers with like washing over the radiators, just what I do is I get them to put something over the top of it, put the hand over it, remove what's over the top of it, and then they feel the convection currents. That's what you're doing. You're stopping your heat going back into your room. So airflow, really important.
That's great. Thanks, Pete. And we've had someone mention that they've been waiting over 3 years to have a smart meter fitted. Is that sort of standard, or are the energy companies doing anything about the smart meter rollout?
Okay. Well, the original smart meter rollout was optimistic, to say the targets, and that was relaxed somewhat, wasn't it? I think it's about 2026 or something like that now. The issue was that they basically SMET 1 meters, you'd change company, and the new company couldn't read, and so they effectively became a dumb meter again. That's all been sorted out because they're now sending a signal to a central point. The delays in the rollout has tended to be with the larger companies that want to brand it and have their own special branded in-house display and stuff like that. As far as I'm aware, if you reapply now, most of the suppliers are saying, yeah, we can get it in 3 weeks' time or whatever. It will vary from supplier. It was the bigger companies that were delayed in it, the Eons and the British Gases, whereas the smaller companies tended to have a more standard smart meter. So shouldn't be a problem anymore. And again, it depends on they use mobile phone technology, so it depends on if you live in a rural area, you might not have the connectivity issues, or it might be that your meter's in a cellar or something, and it's too far away from there are still those technical issues to overcome. So I don't think they can have 100% coverage, can they, Simon?
No, and also there's a backlog due to COVID as well. A lot of the installs didn't take place, so that's also contributing to that. And I think that to try and hit the low-hanging fruit first, and anything that Pete mentioned, like you may have connectivity issues, then there would be a delay on that. But there's a few contributing factors for that time period there.
Brilliant. I think we've got time for one more question, which I'm hoping is an easy one. Is it a legal requirement for landlords to do a review of their EPCs?
I believe so. Since 2018, a private landlord, it was illegal to let a tenancy that performed with an F or a G.
Different for social landlords, though, isn't it? The
Yeah,
private.
there are listed buildings where it's not, it doesn't apply. It is just good practice, because what it does is it informs you what the current measures are recommended. Again, Simon, maybe you want to add to that? I mean, I'm just thinking in terms of like retrofit and things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, having an EPC, having an audit of your housing stock, isn't it, basically? But yeah, is obviously value to. Then you can attract funding for like the social decarbonisation fund, or some other funds that would enable you to go ahead with some of the retrofit schemes. Having that baseline for the EPCs is vital for the housing associations. I think it is different for social landlords and private landlords in terms of what your regulations are. But as Pete's saying, as a large social housing provider, is best practice without a doubt.
I mean, I just briefly on that, I suppose you're looking at, you might set, oh, right, okay, we want to treat every property that's below a D56 this year, and year on year, you're probably looking to achieve higher standards. So yeah, I just think it's good practice. So.
Brilliant, thank you for that, both of you. Ned has got the polls working. So we're going to finish with one of the polls. We'd really love to know in recent months how often you've had to help tenants with budgeting advice. So hopefully by the power of technology, it should pop up on your screen. There we go. So we'll just leave that a couple of minutes just so you've got time to pick one of the options. I'm not sure if you can see how many responses you've had, Ned. I don't know how it works.
Yeah, we've had 66 out of 81. So
that's quite a lot. Yeah, should we pop up the results then?
I'll just give it another couple of minutes. We're at 85.
All right, fabulous.
Of the people have answered. So just give it another minute, and I think we'll slow down now. So I will end the poll now.
Cool.
And sharing the results now.
Oh, that's fairly even split. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. It'd be interesting also to know in maybe another 6 months' time how that might change. So fabulous. Thank you for that, everybody. So I'm going to draw the session to a close now. I have had one question in the chat that's popped up, someone asking for about the hints and tips that we've discussed and a list of them to take and share with tenants.
Yeah.
The January webinar that we did a handout sheet from that, which is available on the Green Doctor website. So Ned, can you drop that link just to the main website into the chat for people? The website also has on it sign up for our email network. So that's the best way of finding out any information. So things from hints and tip sheets that we'll be producing to what the next webinar is and when it's being run. If you signed up to that, you will periodically get a little MailChimp email from us. We won't spam you because we won't be sending them out that frequently. So
I was just going to, sorry, Emily, I was just going to add on, because I didn't say read meters, that generally speaking, red numbers don't count. It's just the black numbers to the left-hand side. With the digital displays, make sure that you can see the digital point, because the point you're only recording the whole numbers, not the numbers after the digital point. And if you can take a photograph, including the serial number of the meter, because it helps greatly with new tenants, you know, in resolving disputes. So wow, you know, just a really small thing can be a massive help.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Pete. That is really useful. Okay, so thanks everybody. Thanks for sticking with us for the hour for your lunch break. We hope that you find that really useful. If you want to share this webinar with your colleagues, they will be going up on YouTube in the next couple of days. So probably early next week now, I'll send out a link to so you can find this and all our other webinars from the series. So you've got plenty of time to your leisure. So thanks for joining us today. We're planning on our webinar series taking largely due to the holiday season, and we're planning on September with a session which will be sort of coinciding with the autumn price rises in energy. So we will promote this on social media and through our general email network of partners that we're aware of. But like I said, the best way to ensure that you find out about webinars is to subscribe to our mailing list on the website. So hopefully Ned's pop that in the chat so that everybody can sign up. So thanks for attending, and I will send you out an email with some tip sheets and the link to the recording early next week.
Right, I'll stop the recording, and many thanks everybody for joining us.